Hello, my name is Kim Perez, and I serve as an engagement director for the Alumni Association at Marquette. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Alumni Association. Today, we are joined by alumni, parents, faculty, staff, students, and friends for our session, Corporate Roundtable on Sustainability, Accelerating Efforts to Tackle Climate Change. Before I hand over to Marco, let me just mention that we will leave time for Q&A at the end, so please submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Marco.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everyone from Wisconsin. My name is Marco Bastel. I am Associate Professor of Supply Chain Management at Marquette University. Together with my colleague, Dr. Kathy Rabine, we would like to welcome you to our first event in Apollo series of conversations on corporate social responsibility and ethics, organized by Management Department here at College of Business Administration. As Kim mentioned, today's event is titled Corporate Roundtable on Sustainability, Accelerating Efforts to Tackle Climate Change. Next, please. Earth's climate is warming. 97% or more of actively publishing scientists around the world agree that the climate warming trends are extremely likely due to human activity. Scientists attribute this global warming trend to the expansion of greenhouse effect caused by increased emission of greenhouse gases dominated by carbon dioxide. Next slide, please. Effects that scientists had predicted in the past would result from global climate change are now occurring. Loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, longer, more intense heat waves and floods are just some of the observable effects adversely impacting not only human habitats, but ecosystems around the world. Next slide, please. At the global scale, CO2 emissions from fossil fuels combustion and industrial processes are responsible for 65% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Electricity and heat production, agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, and buildings are the key economic sectors contributing to the global greenhouse gases production. It is very important to stress that despite a growing number of climate change mitigation policies and initiatives to date, global annual greenhouse gas emissions grew in past decade on average 2.2% per year. With other words, our current mitigation efforts are being outpaced by economic activity and the rise of population, two key underlying factors of greenhouse gas emission production. As a humanity, we are faced with the tough challenge of how to accelerate our efforts in combating climate change. The re-entry of US to Paris Agreement on February 19th is hopefully a signal to global community that US wants to be an active participant on the long road of carbon neutrality and limiting the global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Although the response to climate change should be globally coordinated, multi-stakeholder approach, we are focusing in today's conversation on the role of companies to shed some light on their current efforts and the path forward. Next slide, please. With this in mind, I would like to introduce you to our two guest panelists, Kim Marotta, Global Senior Director of Sustainability and Enterprise Risk Management at Molson Coors, and John Mcintyre, Managing Director at the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. The conversation will be moderated by Tim Henley, Interim Keith Dean of College of Business Administration here at Marquette University. With this, I would like to thank everyone for attending and now handing over to Tim.
Marco, thank you, and welcome to our audience today. Really pleased to see so many of you, and I'm incredibly excited to have our two panelists with us today because they're two real leaders in this space and both Marquette grads. So let me just start out by briefly introducing them, and then we'll kind of quickly get in to the conversation. As we said on the front end, we'd welcome your questions. We're going to try to save some time to get to your questions toward the back end of the hour, so please feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll keep our eyes on that. So maybe first, Kim Marotta. Kim is the Global Senior Director of Sustainability and Enterprise Management at Molson Coors. Kim graduated from Marquette in 1988 from the College of Business, then went to law school at UW-Madison, and has been in the beer industry at Miller Coors and now Molson Coors for the past 15 years or so. And she's been a real renowned national leader in this space. So couldn't be more happy to have Kim with us. And Kim, good morning. I'll get to you in just a minute as we get introducing the first question to you both. Secondly, really thrilled to have John Mcintyre with us. John is also a graduate of Marquette from the College of Engineering in 1987 with just a fascinating background. And you may be curious, American Family Insurance involved in the sustainability space. But what many of you don't know is this really interesting role that John has, and he'll describe a little bit further. He is the managing director of the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. John's an investor in sustainable enterprises. And I think the combination of insights from Kim playing this role for an amazing global organization and John playing this role as an investor in this space will give you a real interesting glimpse of how these two organizations are seeing this amazing landscape. And so maybe with that, Kim, I think we'll start with you. And I know you have a few slides prepared, but we'd really be interested, I know our audience would, Kim, in the role that you're playing at Molson Coors and what the strategy of the company is in the sustainability space. And so, Kim, maybe turn it over to you. And I think we've got a few slides, and then to John, and we'll then get to some questions after that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And it's really great to be here. And thank you, Marco, and thank you, John, and the team that helped put this together. It's really a great way to start a day or head into the lunch hour at least. So just a really quick overview on what climate change means to us as a beer company or a beverage company and the role that we're playing. So Kim, if you don't mind advancing the slides. It's fun having so many Kims. Sorry, I'm not talking to myself. Kim. So, really, when we think about climate change, I think this is just a really great quote to help, set the idea and set the foundation. So, whether it's the pandemic or what we're seeing around climate change, these are unprecedented times. But as a corporation or a company, when you look ahead and understand the balance between your short-term profitability and your long-term viability, that's what's going to determine the winners and losers in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So as Marco talked about, and as we're going to talk about for the next hour, climate change is one of our greatest challenges. We see this across the board in our stakeholder group. When we talk to our consumers, they say after the pandemic, climate change is their top concern. So making sure a business like ours is prepared, is ready, is doing everything possible to mitigate that risk for the long term is really critical, not only to our survival, but obviously the survival of the society as a whole. Next slide, please. So when we talk about climate change, it's part of our overall sustainability strategy. And when we talk about sustainability, it's really a really simple notion. I don't have a beer because it's noon, but most right now. But every time a beer or a beverage is picked up, we leave an imprint behind. And that imprint is on our people, it's on our communities, and it's on society. And Kim, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So we call that literally our imprint. And we want to make sure that the imprint that we have ensures that we'll have a better tomorrow for all of us. And just real quickly, I'll give you a snapshot of what that means. And Kim, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So we look at sustainability in three areas or three pillars. The first one is all about responsibly refreshing, or what we call alcohol responsibility. The middle one is about sustainably brewing, and that's about sustainable agriculture, water stewardship, climate action, and packaging and waste. And then the third is about being collectively crafted. And Kim, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. And so what we're really going to focus on today are the actions that we're taking as a company when it comes to climate change. And there's a lot of questions where we'll go into this deeper and really, share more of these thinking. But for us, it's about building a cleaner path forward. We have 2025 goals that are aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement and actually the more aggressive targets of the 1.5 degree scenario. And so we're focused on what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within our own operations. And that's our scope 1 and our scope 2, as well as across our entire value chain. So working, through packaging with packaging suppliers, transportation, logistics, refrigeration, agriculture, all of that, so that we can ensure a real cleaner path for us as well as the community. And then I think there's one more slide. And so for us, one of the things that's really important is if we do these things, if we collaborate, if we're part of the answers and part of the solutions, we really think that there's a role for each one of us to play to ensure a better future for people and communities and for groups thriving. So with that, that's just a little bit of a tip of the under the iceberg of what we're doing, and I'll turn it back to you, Tim.
Kim, thanks. And what a terrific overview. And your organization, by the way, Molson Coors, has a tremendous reputation in this space. I know that's part of the great work that you and your team are doing. So thank you for that overview. And I know the audience is really looking forward to going one step deeper. So thanks for that. Okay, so let's turn the page now to John Mcintyre. And as I briefly introduce John and his amazing background, the American Family Institute has a slightly different angle on this that I think will be equally interesting to all of you. And so maybe with that, John, I'll turn it over to you and you can talk about your role at American Family, how American Family sees this important space. Because as I've studied and learned more about what you're doing, it's really quite impressive. And I know our audience will be really interested in hearing more, John.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here and connecting with everybody on this really important topic, probably the most important topic of our times. I know the pandemic has been horrible, but this will make the pandemic look small over the next decades if we don't take action. So I want to thank everybody on the Marquette team for setting this up. A quick backgrounder on American Family and myself. So most people have heard of American Family Insurance, based in Madison for the last 95 years, just about. Currently, American Family has about half a dozen insurance companies under its umbrella, under different brand names in different states. And so American Family as an insurer has grown quite a bit over the last 10 years through M&A. We also got involved in not only M&A, but venture capital in a big way. American Family Ventures invested in so-called InsurTech, and that was our first venture fund we set up around 2014, and they've been very successful. But in 2018, there was a desire by our senior leadership to take the next step in corporate responsibility. And so we founded the American Family Insurance Institute for corporate and social impact. We just call it the AmFam Institute for short, so you don't have to say all that. But the focus there was to look at new ways to attack some of society's biggest problems. So very quickly, we look at the climate change and the risk associated with that as one area. We're also looking at three other areas: healthy youth development, which is a subset of healthcare. We look at academic achievement, and we also are taking a real focus on economic opportunity, particularly people that may have been formerly incarcerated, or as we are in a recession now, just what is the next generation of jobs and workforce development look like? So we have a broad remit of things we're looking at across that, but of course today I'm going to focus on our investments and our focus on sustainability. So that's a quickie on the AmFam Institute. What I actually do there, and you can roll to the next slide, is I'm the managing director of the venture fund. So we do have partnerships, we do have programs we run from the Institute, but we also have this venture fund. So the focus of the venture fund can be described in this way. We recognize climate change is causing, huge environmental and social and economic impacts. And as I said, it's going to make a pandemic look small if we don't do something about this. When I was an undergrad in the 1980s, a long time ago now, I took a course and I remember a professor bringing up this concept of greenhouse gases. It was the first time I had heard about it. The bad news is 35 years have gone by and we haven't done nearly enough to address it. So I think the good news is we've woken up to this maybe a little late in the game, that we have to recognize climate change is man-made. It's because we're burning fossil fuels, and we need to get off the carbon energy economy that we created for the last couple of hundred years if we're going to have a chance to turn this around. Examples of this are all over the place. I don't think I need to tell you, but just this last week, the New York Times published a report about changes in what's going on with the Gulf Stream, and they've discovered what they're calling a cold blob in the northern Atlantic. Could signal the shift in the Gulf Stream which could have really serious implications for the world as we see major changes in our weather patterns that are potentially coming. So, you know, the point is, this is scary, but there are things we can do. First of all, by acknowledging it and then taking action. The picture I showed here on the right turns out to be one of the biggest, most costly thunderstorm events ever in U.S. history. I didn't even know how to pronounce derecho before, but we had one that went through Iowa and touched southern Wisconsin last summer, so that really relates directly to the insurance industry and the cost involved to, in this case, the crops themselves, as well as the infrastructure. The second point I wanted to bring up, though, that this impact is negatively impacting underrepresented and underinvested in communities and individuals more. And you can look at that at the national level, and you can look at that here in the United States. Bill Gates just published his book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster, just in the last few weeks. So you might have seen that. He's done a lot of tours talking about his book, and I'd encourage you to read it. But that's one of the things that he really points out, that it's important that we think about the poorest countries and in our own country, our poorest communities, as we think about how to rectify this situation. So there's a moral imperative here. And I have to say, as a Marquette grad, one of the great things going there is, you know, we try to infuse our community with a moral compass as we go out into the business world and live our lives. And this is one of these chances in life where, with this huge issue in front of us for the next several generations that we have to solve, we need to think about all people, and particularly people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum when we look at these issues. At a company level, we have taken a commitment. American Family has to be carbon neutral by 2030. So I'll touch base on that a little bit about some of the things we're doing there. But as Bill Gates pointed out in his book, that's not going to be enough to get to carbon neutral. If we implement all the technology we have today, it'll help quite a bit, but it will not get us there. We're going to have to invent new technology. We're going to have to invent new markets. We're going to have to bring down the cost. The green premium we're paying right now has to come down so that the economic forces can get behind the transition to the green economy. So that's why we're investing externally in startups, partners, and programs to try to really make that happen. Next slide, please. So to do this, again, we have to be responsible. So it is our responsibility, we acknowledge with our values, that we have to protect the future of the next generations in the world. So this is a core value for American Family that, you know, we need to do in everything we take. We need to have equity in what we do. So climate justice is a term that's really come up here in the last few years. So as we make this transition, it's just not for the rich. It has to be for all people. And we need leadership. We've had a really quite terrible lack of leadership over the last couple of decades here. I mean, I got to tell you, I was embarrassed a few years ago when a 16-year-old woman had to shame our generation, the older generation, which I'm a part of, into taking action on climate. So we need to show leadership here. We need to take action. We need to put money to work to really make a difference here. Next slide. Within American Family, as I said, we have taken the pledge to get to carbon neutrality by 2030. We published our Sustainability and Climate Action Strategic Plan that took effect last year. So this will provide a roadmap for us to get to zero carbon. So as we get into the discussion, I can talk a little bit more about specific programs within American Family that we're going to do to get to that. And then last slide here. But what I'm really focused on, I am a venture capitalist. And what I do is invest in the technologies and the startups that I think we need to close this gap to get to zero carbon. Again, as Bill Gates said, is we put in 51 billion tons of carbon equivalents into the atmosphere per year today, and we have to get that to 0. And we have to do that by 2050. So we're not going to be able to do it without investments in great startups like this. So I'd love to spend a little time in the discussion talking about these startups. Block Power in particular is greening urban America by electrifying urban buildings. So I'd love to talk about them. They launched a program here in Milwaukee last year, so I can get in some of those details in the Q&A.
So John, thank you. And what a terrific overview. And now you can see why I'm so excited about this next 45 minutes with these two amazing leaders in this space. And so maybe Kim, I'll start with you. Oftentimes, you either read or hear about maybe concerns that adopting sustainability practices are really expensive or they hurt the bottom line. Obviously, it's not really what Molson Coors believes. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see the kind of investments you're making and how you see that driving value for your company.
Absolutely. So when we look at sustainability, well, you might have heard my title, so Director of Sustainability and Enterprise Risk Management.
Right.
Which sometimes you might not think of those in the same thing, but essentially sustainability is managing long-term environmental risk for the business and providing value and creating value. And the same thing around enterprise risk management. It might not just be the environmental risks. It might be risks to the bottom line, risks to employees and the like, looking at it kind of across the board. So when we look at sustainability, we set out first about what's our most material risks, what matters the most to us as a company, and where do we have the greatest responsibility to act. And we start by doing a materiality mapping, and really that helps us lay out where we want to focus and then build long-term strategies around that area. And as you do that, it's really kind of a combination of investment. It's a combination of mitigating risks. So sometimes if you're thinking ahead, you might actually be reducing some costs that are coming down the line, and then really providing real value for the company. But if you just go at it, just thinking about what it's going to cost. So if I have to put this new technology in, or if I have to put, new filtration equipment in, you're really going to have a hard time getting out of the gates. But when you look at it as cost, risk mitigation, and people improvement processes, that's where you can see really great change.
Yeah, it's an ROI in a different kind of way. So
it is
really well said. And John, maybe over to you. You gave us a glimpse of some of how you think about investment, and you probably think about return on investment in a broad way as well. And maybe let me have posed the question to you, and maybe you can use an example or two of one of your portfolio companies and help share with our audience how you think about driving value, John.
Yeah, good point Kim made on risk management. Obviously, you have to look at what's the cost of not taking action in anything you do. So you get that full picture. And you'd like to think that all companies and people see the long-term implications of this and therefore are willing to make the investments, even though it costs more money in the short term than the long term. Also, Bill Gates addressed this in his book again, I think in a great way, in that, there is a green premium we pay for a lot of things today, and it's too high. It's just, many of us don't have the wherewithal, whether we're an organization or an individual, to pay that premium. Like electric vehicles are a good example right now. The cost has come down tremendously, but they're still expensive. Total cost of owning a green vehicle, electric vehicle, is lower today than using an ICE car, internal combustion engine car, but you have to pay a bunch of money up front. So that's an issue across all of this. So how do we bring down the green premium is one answer to getting over that. But shifting over to the investment side just for a minute. So what I really enjoy about being an investor, and love to talk to anybody about a career in venture capital, because what we think about is, how do we create fund structures that will pay for themselves over the long term? And that's how venture capital works. You put money in startups that some of them will work, a lot of them won't, but in this whole portfolio you put together of technology companies, the ones that work out and are successful pay for all the ones that didn't. And you can grow that thing over time so you can get more and more startups funded. So that's what we're doing with the AmFam Institute Fund. We have 18 investments we've made over the last 2 years. We know all the companies we put money into won't succeed, with their products. So I already highlighted Block Power. I'll pick another one just to, I had on the slide as well, a company called Solstice. So this is community solar. The concept of community solar is you come together with a group of people and you commit to buying solar energy. And based on that commitment, a solar developer will build a solar farm in your area. So what Solstice does is they aggregate that customer demand and manage those customer relationships over the entire life cycle of that solar farm. What's really neat about it from a social equity point of view is no money is required down. And you don't have to live in a house where you own the roof. You could live in an apartment or a condo or wherever. You just need to make a commitment to that project. And over time, it pays for itself. So what we're seeing is innovation there in business models that, you know, we're able to drive solar into areas where it hasn't been able to go before because we've taken that premium out. You don't have to pay up front to get access to solar energy as an apartment renter or something like that. So that's a great example of where if they're successful as a company then, and at some point they will exit through an acquisition or going public, that money comes back into my funds and my fund pays for itself. So we're able to scale and sustain over time. So we plan to make about 25 investments with our current fund and then hoping to raise capital in the coming couple of years and then, you know, invest in another 50 companies and keep that going.
John, just remarkable, and what vision by the organization, and hopefully sessions like this help give visibility to some of this great work that you're doing. I want to move on to the topic, since I'm talking to two leaders of two companies that are role models. It strikes me as being role models in this space. I want to talk about culture, and it seems that the leading companies effectively embed this thinking, sustainability thinking, into the fabric of their organization. Maybe start with you, Kim, and how do you manage to embed sustainability within the culture of your organization? How do you drive this with your employees and your stakeholders, your supply chains and so forth? So maybe say a few words about that, and then John would love your comments as well.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is 10 years ago, we would be talking to our executive leadership team and we'd say, sustainability matters. It really matters to our employees. And they'd ask, how do you know? What's your data point on that? So we set out and we actually survey every single new employee that joins Molson Coors. And we ask them 6 questions. And really start really basic, like, were you aware of our sustainability efforts before you joined the company? Down to, was it important to you? Did it impact your decision? Was it the #1 reason you came to choose to work at Molson Coors? And certainly on awareness, we'll see upwards 92, 93, 94%, are saying, yeah, of course, I was aware of the sustainability efforts. Now, quite honestly, if you're going to come work at a company, you're probably going on the website, looking up information and getting some of those details. So it's good. It makes us feel better, but good to know they're at least aware. But then when you see important, that number's still up, over 70%. It's important to me to work for a company that represents my own values. But kind of the money, slide or the money point is that over 42% of our new employees who are joining us, this is across demographics, backgrounds and positions, they tell us it's the most important reason they came to work at Molson Coors. So over pay, over location, over job, over culture. So if you want something that's going to define your culture, having a company that's committed to investing in its communities, being aggressive on climate change, managing packaging waste, being a responsible company when it comes to alcohol, those are things that matter to our new employees. And we see it, day in and day out.
Wow, what a brilliant idea. Just the process of doing surveys. I'm not sure many companies quite embed that into all their new employee surveys, and it kind of establishes right from the beginning how critical this is to the culture. And I'm sure your role and your CEO's position, because the tone starts at the top in these things, really, doesn't it, Kim?
It absolutely does. It starts at the top, but even above the CEO, it starts with the board. So having an engaged board, having a committee that recognizes sustainability, is aware of it, is knowledgeable, can answer the questions, because that's what investors are expecting. And a CEO, whether it's in that CEO's goals or in the compensation, and then on down through the leadership team, really, really critical.
So you raised a couple of other really interesting points there, including investor expectations. And boy, you can't pick up the Wall Street or anything in the last month and not read about the heightened focus in this space and this point on boards of directors. And now how important this is to a board leader. 5 years ago, that wasn't the case, maybe at Molson Coors, but 5 years ago, it certainly wasn't the case. And John, I want to turn to you. You're more of a private company, but some of the same precepts certainly apply here. Would love to get your take on embedding this in the culture of not just the AmFam Institute, but all of American Family, and a little bit of how you see it.
Yeah, I think Kim's points were excellent. And I do think it's a trend in large corporations, but also small businesses about there is a generational change here. I think employees increasingly want to work for companies that have products and services that they think match their values. So I think Kim made that point well, and it sounds like they're well ahead in measuring that. We're doing that with ourselves and also customers, quite frankly. The insurance business is competitive, lots of advertising to generate customer interest in our products. And so we want to brand ourselves as a insurance company that cares about the environment, who cares about social issues and so on. And no, you didn't see that 5 years ago. So I give credit. I just joined American Family 2 years ago to help start the Institute. And I've been pleasantly surprised, I have to say. I moved back here to Wisconsin from Northern California, where I worked in Silicon Valley for a long time. And the very progressive attitude about, not progressive in the political sense, but in the business sense, again, about this is really key to the corporation going forward, about how we brand ourselves, how we attract and retain diversity in our workforce and in our customer base, has really been a driver for our board and our senior leadership team, which leads to them going, hey, what are we going to do to really walk the talk? So now that becomes critical, because if you're not authentic in this, I think, again, these same people that we're trying to attract as employees and customers will call us on it. So this can't just be a marketing campaign. It has to be something you actually do and invest in. And that's why we started the Institute. We're putting real dollars to work and partnerships and investments, as I said, to do that. And I have to mention, our CEO just launched last week a new campaign we call Free to Dream, which we talk about. We've committed $105 million to social issues, including the environment. Some of those will be these investment startups, and some of it will be for our other programs around sustainability and other things. So that just shows you we're bringing these things together as this is core to the company going forward. And I think to be a successful organization in the future, you're going to have to do that. So I'd like to think that Molson Coors and AmFam are on the cutting edge of that, but I think it's going mainstream.
I might just observe, and John, you said something in your opening comments. I think nothing happens by accident. The fact that you are two Jesuit-educated leaders driving these critically important initiatives, I think some of this comes back to the values that Marquette stands for, and hopefully that's kind of how you feel. And again, couldn't be more proud of you as our Marquette alum in this space. I want to, by the way, thank you. We're getting a few questions that are coming through the Q&A. Please continue to send them. We would like to get to as many of those as possible. And if we don't, we'll try to get back to you if we can't. But I've got one or two more before we get to the audience Q&A. Maybe the concept of advice for a roadmap. Your two organizations are certainly on the spectrum of being proactive in the sustainability space. You are far to the upper right. But there's a lot of other organizations that are just embarking on this journey. And Kim, I would guess in your role, because you've been in sustainability most of your career, you get this question a lot from other organizations. We've got a lot of different participants in our crowd today, some with small companies that aren't sure whether this is something they can take on. And so maybe I'd ask the two of you just say a few words about considerations for a roadmap. If someone is early on this journey, as your organization probably was many years ago, maybe just any advice you might have on maybe some principles for the roadmap, Kim, for our audience to consider. Then now, John, I'll come to you.
Absolutely. I talked, earlier on about materiality, and I'll just touch that again, just to kind of give you a sense of what that means and how you could do it, whether you're a big business or a small business. But when you want to think about sustainability, you want to get really focused on what's most material to your business. So saving the polar bears to Molson Coors doesn't necessarily make sense. It's not material to where we're heading as a business, and it's not what the stakeholders expect of us. So what we did is really just simply sat down with our top executive leaders and leaders of procurement and leaders of marketing and CEOs and chair and board members. And we asked them, what are the most important things that we're focused on as a business? And then we sent out surveys. I guess we do like surveys at Molson Coors, but we sent out surveys to our key stakeholder groups. So we're a global organization, and we went to each one of our business units and said, which one of your stakeholders influence your strategy or your direction? So sometimes it was, government leaders or community leaders or the media or our distributors or our retailers or our investors. But once we heard from them about which stakeholders were the most important, we had a list of emails and we sent out a really quick survey asking those stakeholders, where do you think Molson Coors has the greatest responsibility to act? We got that information back in and we were able to map it. So based on our internal and our external, where are the issues that we see in a 4-quadrant? Where do we have the greatest responsibility to act, and what's most important to our business? And once we did that, we knew where we wanted to focus. And you kind of saw that on that slide that I shared with you before, everything from alcohol responsibility to responsible and ethical supply chain. And then we built strategies. And as you build that strategy, one of the key things is you want to find out, where are you already? Where's the puck going for your organization? You don't want to have these goals that are just outside. You want to build it into what you're doing as part of your business. Where are your peers and your competitors? And then do you want to be leading in that group? Do you want to be, a fast follower? Or do you want to be, a laggard in that group? And then based on that, you can set your own goals and your own strategies to get there, and then build in the capabilities. So when you set a target, oftentimes you don't know what you're going to do to get there or what you need to do, because John mentioned technology might not exist, but build out the glide path so you know what the steps are to analyze and engage and make progress against that, and then certainly report out. So I think that's kind of the key steps in building out any strategy, but particularly a sustainability strategy.
Kim, I love the focus on both internal and external, and kind of mapping both of those out. So if there's organizations that are not as far along as you are in the journey, some great pointers. So thank you so much for sharing. John, would love to hear your take.
Yeah, no, I think Kim makes some great, again, general points about developing strategy. And, the one, for those who haven't worked in large or small organizations before, you do have to look at business drivers and match them with the things we're talking about here today. And then maybe you add some special sauce in there to accelerate things further. But that's a process you need to go through, and to build consensus in your organization and all those things you need to do. Sometimes it can take a leap too. And so that's where I think for us, we've been figuring it out a bit as we go. So when you do something like the Institute, we decided we would extend our corporate responsibility with existing relationships we have here in Wisconsin, with nonprofits that we work with other types of organizations, working with the startup ecosystem, partners like Generator, things like that. Have been working with startups to develop that types of things. But then we thought about, now we're really a national company, so we need national scope, and we need some breakthrough opportunities, and that led to creating a venture capital fund for social impact. And there aren't that many yet in the United States, I'll say. There are many corporations that have venture capital, but usually for strategic reasons. Like I said, we do, that we started back in 2014. But I've seen about 10, maybe 12 companies set up venture capital funds just for social impact so far. So it's a growing trend that'll happen, but it's a bit of a leap. Let's go try this. So it's less about it's a roadmap and more about let's try it, figure it out, and see how it works. And again, if it works, we knew there was going to be a high reward, and because we could scale this thing dramatically. But that's that takes leadership. That takes your CEO and your board having firm beliefs and what they're talking about, and willing to put some money to work to try some new things as well.
John, thank you. And again, I'm now starting to feel the number of questions that have come through. And one of the beauties of doing this at Marquette, and by the way, our professors, Kathy, Marco, did a great job of publicizing this to our students. So we got a number of students that are also listening as well. And obviously looking to the two of you as role models. And certainly we will have lots of students that have a real interest in this space, climate change and sustainability. And maybe any advice, maybe John, to you and then Kim, about if you are interested in this as a potential career, what might be paths to get more involved? Again, John, yours is a bit unique given the investor role.
Yeah.
I would suspect maybe you could comment on that. And Kim, obviously at Molson Coors, given your survey, lots of people join you for that reason. Maybe talk a little bit about what sort of entry jobs if people aspire to be like the two of you, which I know a lot of our audience does. How do they follow that path? John, maybe you first.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, going to school here in Milwaukee in the Midwest, I didn't think too much about being an investor. I was in engineering school, for gosh darn sake, but I ended up at Intel Corporation. It was my first job out of college and moved to Silicon Valley. And so that was a whole new world for me. And I'm working in tech really, opened up tons of new horizons for me. But I got interested in this venture capital thing because I was talking to an Intel executive one day, and I said, "Don't we make chips? Why do we invest in startups? I don't get it, And he said to me, "Yeah, well, here in technology land, often startup companies will come to the bigger companies with money and ask for investment." And so we had one of those companies come to us a couple of years ago, and we said no. And we passed on the investment because we didn't have a venture capital group at the time. It was just somebody making a decision. That company turned out to be Cisco.
Wow.
So forming venture capital groups has now become kind of a standard thing across all industries because you need to have this relationship between existing industries and big companies with money and small startups to innovate going forward. So that's what enticed me and got me really interested in venture capital. But now you don't have to go to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, to me, is an attitude. It's not a place. You don't have to move there if you want to get involved in startup ecosystems. So the mindset there is around understanding. I think we have a lot of good programs, and I know we do at Marquette, around entrepreneurship. So there's understanding that, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? It's, high risk, there's no safety net, there's lots of things. And not everybody is built to be an entrepreneur. That's another thing to understand. Some of us need more stability in our lives and so on. So that's fine. But we've had a lot of that now. But who supports those entrepreneurs? It's investors. So if you want to take that career path, there are now many ways you can do that. And I'm seeing a lot more university-sponsored programs popping up. There are independent programs that pop up. I, in particular, went through this program. You've probably heard of the Kaufman Foundation in Kansas City.
Yeah, I saw you were there, right?
Yeah, they support entrepreneurship. They've been around for 55 years, but they started a program in the 1990s called Kaufman Fellows, which is specifically a program focusing on investors. And I got in a program like that. And I'm seeing a bunch of programs like that, particularly, again, around now we're trying to support more diversity in venture capital and entrepreneurship. So I'm seeing a lot of people of color and women who are interested in becoming investors, and there's a lot of programs popping up to support them in their career path. Final thing I'll say is I did put my email out there. If anybody wants to talk more about it, I'm happy to talk one-on-one about a career in venture capital.
That's awesome, John. Say, Kim, obviously lots of people join your company because of your purpose. So maybe talk a little bit about if you've got students of ours, aspiring sophomores, juniors, seniors, interested in potentially a career path like yours. Tell us a little bit about maybe some paths towards that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing, just a little bit of my background and kind of links back to that Jesuit values, Tim, that you talked about. I actually, when I graduated from law school, I was a public defender. And I was a public defender for 13 years. And it was really, I went there because I wanted to long-term become a judge. And I wanted to get the courtroom experience. And I thought, I'll stop in for a year or two, get the courtroom experience, and then move on and do some litigation somewhere else. But I got sucked in because that whole notion of social justice and how you can enhance your community, whether it's one client at the time, like helping one client get a job or one client getting drug and alcohol treatment, or a family, or what you can do to look at all the issues that we're facing, particularly I was in Milwaukee. So the racial disparity issues, the social inequality issues, and getting involved in making a difference. And I had 4 kids, and I was eventually kind of commuting back and forth to Madison because I became the deputy public defender, and I just couldn't do the commute anymore. So I ended up networking and trying to figure out just that same question, that it doesn't matter how old you are, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Yeah.
And so I met with others in the community, and it just so happened that Miller Brewing Company at the time was looking for someone to lead community affairs and corporate social responsibility / sustainability at the time. And because of that social justice connection in the community,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like a public defender would move into a corporate role leading sustainability, but you could take those skill sets and bring them in and really hit the ground running and make a difference. So whether now it's instead of one client at a time, you can do it one community, one, state, one, nation at a time. So it's really just an awesome opportunity. So long story short, just do what you're passionate about and you'll find your road. I hire people on my team that have communications backgrounds because we do a lot of writing, a lot of speaking. I hire people on my team that have public policy backgrounds. I've hired people that were PhD in English and teaching English or teaching supply chain management, a marketing background because we're embedded in our brands, a procurement background because you want to buy packaging and you want to have, spend your time looking at sustainable packaging. So there are a variety of things that could lead you in this way. And so just do what you're passionate about. And it's probably going to go into almost any role that you're looking at down the line and in the future.
Wow, great, super answer. And I would guess you have a lot more students listening, Kim, that are going to get on your website soon, find out about a path to Molson Coors. I want to try to get to a few audience questions these last 10 or 15 minutes. I got really a good broad one. So a lot of companies are taking on different sustainability projects. Have you seen either at your organizations or elsewhere how people tend to look at them more broadly? Obviously, this is on the mind of the board of directors of large companies these days. Is there a dashboard of sorts at Molson Coors, Kim, that you kind of track these, understand the cost and the benefits? I know sometimes those benefits aren't always in terms of tangible dollars because there's some things that are more broad than that. And so maybe say a few words if you've seen some examples of how you pull all this together in a way that can be understood by a company's board. Ultimately, it's investors. Of course, you probably have sustainability reports that you share with investors. So maybe just say a few words about the bigger picture, Kim.
Sure. I'm going to steal something that I heard from a colleague just this morning on a call. We were talking about just long-term goals, and it's not just what you want to be famous for, but you have to also look at what you don't want to be infamous for. So when you're looking at it from that standpoint, you're really managing, like I talked about, both the risk and the opportunities. But I'll give a better example. So for us, obviously the idea of plastics and waste is just so on the forefront of everyone's minds. And we make a beverage that's either in a can or a glass bottle, PET bottle, and often has shrink or fiberboard packaging and the dreaded plastic 6-pack rings, which at one point in life, everybody loved plastic because it was easy and it was simple. But certainly this burgeoning plastic crisis is a really significant issue. So as we look at what we do to manage this risk, we set targets and goals. So 100% recycled content, 100% of our packaging is reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And we have at least 30% recycled content in any of our plastic packaging. But at the same time, we have to figure out, do we eliminate the packaging? So we look at what's pushing us. Is it, in Europe, the regulations around plastics are so significant that the taxes and the penalties that we're going to pay outweigh any cost of putting new machines and new technology. Our largest retailer told us, we will not take your product in our stores. Tesco told us this, if you have 6-pack plastic rings or shrink on your containers. So make the change now is what we had to do. In Canada, we're facing new regulations around plastics. And in the US, they're popping up state by state by state. So we adopt our strategy, look at when we have to, or when we might have to pull the levers to put CapEx and OpEx out the door versus what it might cost us for not taking that action. So every single thing that we look at, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's plastics, whether it's water, all those investments have, your stakeholder pressures and demands that help guide when and how you make those decisions.
So perfect. John, maybe a slightly different angle on this, because in your portfolio companies, I'm sure you're looking at costs and benefits and trying to look at things in kind of a broader, holistic way. And I would guess that's how you evaluate the performance of some of your portfolio companies, and maybe more importantly, those companies you may invest in the future. So maybe say a few words about how the AMPAM Institute looks at this, John.
Yeah, I might take a little different angle here than cost benefit. Obviously, like as an investor, there's cost. And one of the things I have to do is put together a fund so I have actual money to deploy. But then, from a benefit point of view, it's a high risk, high reward doing venture capital. So I know a lot of those investments will not perform particularly well, but some of them will, and that'll pay for everything, as I said earlier. And that's how the VC model works in general. So the focus is much more then on opportunity and opportunity cost. So bringing it back to what I said earlier, and what Gates did a good job of pulling out in his book is, while we have this huge problem to solve, and I think we're all a little nervous about how are we going to be able to solve this problem fast enough at a global scale, it's a huge business opportunity. Right. It is just, this is the opportunity of, for any students or young people on here, of your career. I'm hoping, on the latter part of my career, we're setting the table for things that people can come in and grow for the future, because, it's gonna happen. I am convinced that we're going to transition to a carbonless energy economy, which underpins our entire economy. And so that means there's going to be a lot of change, and that equals opportunity. Obviously, people can be negatively impacted by that, and we want to mitigate that. But there's going to be huge opportunities, whether you choose to do a startup or work for an established company, whatever path you choose. If I were a student today, I would be looking at this as a wide open opportunity over the next 20, 30 years to go attack. So while there's cost involved in anything we want to go do, I think the opportunities outweigh it. And I'll say one more thing about failure, because that's a big thing about it. I said Silicon Valley is a state of mind. It's not really a place. Don't be afraid to fail. That's a good thing, particularly as you take on endeavors you're passionate about. If that particular one endeavor doesn't work out and it fails, quote unquote, but you learn something. Take what you learn, because you learn best when you fail, and go on to the next step in whatever your passion is. And that is what really drives the startup ecosystem. It's actually failure that drives it. Until people get to a successful level, they will remember those lessons they learned. So that would be my other point on opportunity is, it's not always the first try. Don't be deterred by potential failure. Celebrate failure and keep moving. It's okay to cry though. I had a startup and it failed, and I did cry. But then I went on to the next thing. So.
Well, John, that is perfect. Really, really terrific answer. We're kind of getting towards the top of the hour. But I think there's one question, Kim, I think I'd like to pose to you that came from someone in the audience. And this relates to the broader supply chain. So it's one thing to focus on sustainability within the four walls of Molson Coors. It's another thing to really be a sponsor for the entire supply chain. Customers, suppliers, and maybe say a few words about how important that area of focus is, and the focus you have as the leader in this space regarding all the stakeholders to Molson Coors. Maybe say a few words about that and how your company approaches it.
Absolutely. And, just from an example from climate change alone, when you look at our supply chain, our largest part of our greenhouse gas emissions are within our packaging. And so working with our packaging suppliers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain is critical. And you might think, well, how do you do that? So we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions within our own operations, but looking at them to how they decarbonize, how they lightweight, how they innovate is really key to how we focus on that. I'm sorry, it's loud in the background.
No, not at all.
Then the other part too, when we look at our supply chain, we would always say from grain until glass. And so working with the barley farmers, water is one of the main ingredients in our products. And it's really critical to us that we have high quality and long-term availability of water. And more than 90% of the water we use is actually within our agricultural supply chain. So we built sustainable agriculture practices with our barley farmers. We invest with them because it's, you can't ask them to take risks without having some, stake in it. And then we track and measure how much water they use, nitrogen, phosphorus, fertilizer, and then pay them more to actually sustainably grow our barley. So just two examples of how you work, upstream, and then certainly across our retailers like Walmart and downstream. So really critical to have it embedded within your entire supply chain.
John, let me give you a chance to add to that and how you look at the entirety of the stakeholder community within the investments you look at, John. I think you're on mute, John.
I was responding to a question on text. So could you restate the question? Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
John, just maybe to add to Kim's point, the broader topic of outside the four walls of an organization, and
Yeah.
Kim talked about the importance of the supply chains, and obviously as you look at the investor companies, maybe just a couple of additional comments there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm totally externally focused, but working with my colleagues who are internal, Kim mentioned earlier, I'm working really closely now with our risk management people who really look at the risk for our organization and our people. But then I'm bringing in this outside lens of what are you seeing in the world with startups, with investors, with other corporations, and trying to bring that in. So you get this mix of, a focus on what we need to do, our strategies and our goals internally, and bringing in the external perspective and bringing those two things together. And so we've created some workforces across our insurance organizations, our sustainability organization, and our venture capital organizations, all bringing different points of view in, and that's been really productive.
John, thanks. And we're getting towards the top of the hour. And wow, has this hour gone by incredibly quickly. We've got some great questions to the audience. We got to a few of those, certainly not all of them. But it's even more clear to me now why we invited the two of you to be in our inaugural panel. And so I want to really thank you. I learned a lot. I'm sure our participants learned a lot. And I saw a lot of familiar names of those people that are on this webcast today. And a lot of them lead really important companies. I'm sure they learned a lot from the two of you. So I want to thank you on behalf of Marquette for your incredible insights. You offered, John, to be available for others, and I'm sure, Kim, you would as well. There's people that would like to learn more about what's happening in your respective organizations. I also want to just say a few words about Marco Bastel, who opened this presentation, and Kathy Rabine. They're two of our top professors here at the college, and they came to me a number of months back because they said this is a topic that should be important to our College of Business and to Marquette University. As we said a couple of times, it's kind of embedded in the Jesuit ethos, isn't it? This kind of ability to serve, servant leaders. That's what the two of you are doing, and really just an absolutely fascinating way. So I want to make sure to thank Marco and Kathy. It's clear to me that this is something we can build on. Yeah, I'd like to think this could be a brand of Marquette to stand for sustainability and putting forth incredible leaders like the two of you. So what an amazing way to kick off this series. As we're in the process of getting wrapped up, it's an important time for Marquette, and I couldn't miss this opportunity. And maybe some of you on this webcast saw the news that literally just last week, our Board of Trustees gave us approval to break ground on a new College of Business facility. The three of us went to Marquette, the three of us here on the screen. I'm much, much older than our other two panelists, but we probably have needed a new College of Business facility for some time now. For those of you who haven't seen the news, it's 100% donor funded, really for the first time in our university's history. And this will be a sustainable building in so many ways and will allow us to host gatherings like this for decades to come in a way that we couldn't possibly do in our current humble home. And so just wanted everyone on the call to be sure to have seen that great news. We have so many things lying ahead of us in the College of Business. And one of the things we want to do is be more engaged in conversations like this, to take two leaders. The fact that they're from Marquette is just doubly good, to talk about things that matter. And so we would welcome for you that are listening today, if you've got other topics you'd like to see us stand for at Marquette. I couldn't have thought of a better one. So when Marco and Kathy came to me a while back, and then they were able to recruit Kim and John, wow, what an amazing way to launch this series. So to the two of you, thank you. Just tremendous insights. Kim, terrific. John, I learned a lot. I'm sure our participants learned a lot. Ideas of things that you think the College of Business should be bringing to our constituents. That's what we're trying to do here. So maybe with that, I'll just close by saying thank you to all the organizers, to everyone behind the scenes, to Marco and Kathy, John and Kim. Thank you very much. We're going to have sessions like this again in the future. And now we have a high bar, Kim and John, right? We have a high bar to try to live up to. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
You too.
Thanks, Kim.
Guys.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.